Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to be with you all. Just want to kick off this week with so much information coming out of the combine. We're going to discuss a lot of that and get into that. But before we do, I want to address something. You may have seen the news yesterday that Chris Mortensen passed away from the Mort Report. And I just want to personally extend to his beautiful family my condolences. Chris is one of the finest people that I've ever known in this business. I met him many, many years ago at a Super Bowl, and we were sitting across from each other. And he came over and sat with me and introduced himself. Of course, I knew who he was and introduced myself to him. And we just began to talk. And found out through our conversation that we actually had many mutual ties to each other, one of them being our faith in Christ. And we just began to visit, and it was really fun. And I picked his brain a lot, and it was a great time. And every time I saw him after, he was always so incredibly warm, funny, extremely funny. He was the original trendsetter, him and Will McDonough, really, but of the NFL insider type people. And I always laughed because a lot of people in my position, all we talk about is our jobs. And with him, it was not all that we talked about. It was so many other things, parenthood, all of those things. It was impossible to have a conversation with Mort and not talk about family, which I always loved about him. And I want to just say that NFL media lost a great person, but people did. And he touched a lot of lives. He impacted a lot of people. And I always say that whatever you do, it's about people. And he certainly exemplified that. And he was a terrific human being away from the television. And so, to all of Mort's family, our condolences. But to those of you that knew him and knew that his faith was just completely rooted, while we mourn, we know today that he celebrates. So, to all of you who knew him, we all lost somebody, and we wish them nothing but the best. Okay. Michael Lombardi was a former Raider employee, and his sons were former Raider employees, Matt and Mick. And he went on the GM Shuffle podcast and made a lot of comments about Antonio Pierce that just did not make any sense. And I have waited to address them for a few reasons, but I'm going to today. I want you to know that I respect Michael Lombardi as a father because his two sons are terrific young men. And I judge a man, that is one of the very first things I judge about him, is what kind of dad is he? And so I'm going to give him all the respect in the world there. I have in the past, prior to getting with the Raiders and covering the Raiders 5 years ago, enjoyed him on the radio. When I would hear him on the radio or hear him on whatever, enjoyed him. But I always would listen to him and think, man, he's very hypercritical of the Raiders. And so when I got to Vegas, I remember somewhere something I had seen that Lombardi again had gone after the Raiders. And I asked someone, and I don't remember who the person was, or I would tell you who it was. It was somebody connected to the media, to the team. Now, it could have been a media member. It could have been a member of the team. I just don't remember. And I apologize for not remembering that. I should. And they talked about, well, he's just bitter because he got let go from the Raiders. I didn't cover the team at the time. I know nothing about the semantics of what happened. I'm not going to get into that because I have no idea. I'm like, okay, it makes sense. Because whatever he had said, it didn't make sense to me. And then his kids come and all the criticism ends, which you can understand that. That's fair. My son works for a company and I had a bad dealing with that company and I wasn't going to say anything. Well, first of all, that's not really my nature, but I wouldn't have said anything. My son works there. But then they leave. His sons get fired in the sweeping changes of Josh McDaniels. And then he takes some shots at Antonio Pierce. Now, I want to say this to you. People take shots at me all the time. When you're a public figure, that's just the world that you live in. I'm good with that. And I don't defend myself. Don't need to. Um, if you defend yourself, then you're taking time to rehash stuff that my job's just to keep going forward. But my dad taught me a long time ago about the importance of standing up for people, for good people. I've shared with you many times on this podcast, and we're going to get into all Raiders in a minute, but I've shared with you many times on this podcast, things that my father had taught me. And my dad used to always say, be big enough to defend people who aren't defending themselves. Now, I wasn't talking about cowards, but there are certain situations, if you hear people gossiping about somebody, stand up and say, I'm not listening to your gossip. I'm not going to listen to that crap. No, I'm not participating in that. You come to me and try to gossip about somebody, and I'm going to shut you down. Just I don't want to listen to gossip about anybody. And so that was how I was raised. Now, in the interest of fair disclosure, I genuinely like Antonio Pierce. I respect Antonio Pierce. I think he is an absolutely terrific husband. He is a great father. We know that he was an amazing football player. And the fact that in such a short time he's gone from high school to college to the pros to now being a head coach of a job he earned. He wasn't given the job. He earned it. He is proven to be a very good coach. Now, be a great coach, got to win a Super Bowl. But clearly his meteoric rise would tell you if it was coaching acumen. It just didn't happen by accident. And so as you look at what he's gone through, and so he's not going to defend himself. I can tell you today, he could give a flying rat's behind about Michael Lombardi's opinion. Doesn't care. I know that for a fact. Just doesn't care. Okay, say whatever you want. I don't care. I love that. I'm that way too. But Lombardi says some things that I just can't let go as a guy that covers the team. And the fact that Antonio has been asked about it, I just feel like I've got to address it a little bit. And so this is something that Lombardi says, quote, this guy's driving me crazy, unquote. Okay. Why is that a relevant opinion, Mike? That's fair. I have no problem if somebody asks you, what do you think of Antonio Pierce? The guy's driving me crazy. I have no issue. So I'm not taking any issue with that comment. But then he goes a step farther. Can he just shut up? Why won't somebody in the Raiders tell him to shut up? Why, Mike? Is he a dog? Why should he shut up? Tell me what value it is. He's being himself. He's being genuine. Now, you've been critical of the Raiders for years. Was it genuine when you weren't critical for a year and a half when your kids were employed there? You don't have to like what AP says. I quite frankly do because I think it's hilarious. I was at the NFL Combine this week. Didn't see you there, Mike. I'm sure you were there. Just didn't see you, or I would have talked to you about it. And listening to all the coaches and executives and people who kept mentioning me, man, I hope he succeeds. I want him to succeed. It's great seeing him just not change, be himself. He didn't get the job and all of a sudden become a buttoned up, yes, can I have some gray poupon? Oh, he got the job and he's like, listen, I was hired to get fired. That's the way this league works. And one thing I'm going to have if I get fired is me, and I'm going to be true to me. Love that. Absolutely love that. Because he's being genuine. He's being real. Let me say this to you. I ran into Rich Bisaccia, had a great visit with Rich, talking to Rich, and I love Rich. And our conversation was private. So I'm just going to, it was just private because it was two guys. It wasn't because it was earth shattering. Secrets. But he said, one of the first thing he says to me is, how are things in Vegas? I said, good. And he goes, man, I'm rooting for AP. He goes, he's just being himself. No bitterness out of Rich Bisaccia. No anger. He didn't trash Mark Davis. He didn't attack Antonio Pierce. And you know what, Mike? He could have. He should have had that job. Wow. I like it. I'm rooting for him. I want him to do it. Was Rich Bisaccia didn't have one negative word to say about Antonio Pierce. Just rooting for him. Appreciates him. You know what? He's not doing it the way everybody else does it. But how great. Matter of fact, I mentioned to Rich, I said, it's so cool because AP's hard is I'm hired to get fired. So I want to be me, at least through the process. I want to be me. And Rich is like, that is great. That's a guy that could have been bitter. That's a guy that could have been mad. And rightfully so. Wait a minute. You could make an argument. You could make an argument that Rich Bisaccia did a better job than AP. Make an argument. It's a guy that had every right. But remember, having the right doesn't make it right. To be bitter, to be angry, to be mad. Oh. Rich has nothing but love for the Raiders. Respect for Mark Davis. Love for the Raiders. Another Raider coach that I ran into, a former Raider coach, not a head coach, but a former Raiders assistant coach, came up to me, goes, isn't it fun watching AP? I go, it really is. And they go, man, I bet you're having fun with it. I said, he is, because he's genuine. But you want that guy to shut up? You want that guy to shut up. You want the guy who's being genuine and real to shut up. But wait, because the comments get worse. It's like just digging a hole for himself. Then he goes on and says, it's so comical because he's from Compton and he thinks he knows the Raider way. It's a joke. He's comical? It's comical? A man being genuine. A man who makes the decision, I'm going to improve my life. A man who makes the decision that says, I come from Compton. Listen, Mike, I come from the cornfields of Langsburg, Michigan. My biggest threat growing up was if I would get a fish hook stuck in my finger. I grew up 2,000 miles away, more than that from Oakland, but 2,000 from Vegas. So here's a guy that says, listen, I'm going to avoid gang activity. I'm going to avoid all of the traps of where I was raised, and I'm going to make something of my life. This is a man with a work ethic, many match, none exceed. This is a man that values being a husband and a father. This is a man that's educated. This is a man that became wealthy. This is a man who I would make him angry if I told you things that I know he's done for people that nobody knows about. He is constantly helping anyone he can help get up. This is a man who's fiercely loyal. And this is a man that cares for people and loves people. This is a man who could take some shots at some folk. He keeps his mouth shut. And you're going to call him comical? Now, listen, I'm not a cheerleader for the Raiders. I'm not a fan. But I've told you numerous times on this podcast, my dad taught me to root for good people, and AP's good people. He's not going to come out and say this. He's too busy finding future Raiders. But it's all true. Comical? You could say, I find it amusing. Comical? And then, because he's from Compton, he thinks he knows the Raider way. It's a joke. Mike, I'm from the cornfields of Langsburg, Michigan. Where you're from, I'm going to tell you something I've learned about Raider Nation, and I'm not a fan. I've learned something about Raider Nation. I'm friends with a lot of people in Raider Nation. But let's just use the Violator, Wayne Mabry, as an example, who's become a dear friend of mine. The Raider Way has nothing to do with where you're from. The Raider Way has farmers in it, and it's got folks from the streets. It's got gang members, and it's got preachers. It's got doctors, and it's got lawyers. And it has those who struggle in blue-collar jobs. They come from the cities, they come from the inner cities, they come from the suburbs, and they come from the rural flatlands of America. Raider Nation is a lot more than color, because you find them brown, red, yellow, white, black. Raider Nation is men and women. It's Republicans and Democrats. It's conservatives and liberals. It's Christians and it's atheists. It's Muslims and it's Buddhists. Raider Nation is Americans and Canadians and Mexicans and Russians and Scottish and Irish, British and Filipino. It's all the nations of the world. Raider Nation is not about a gender, a race, a political ideology. It's not about a socioeconomic background. But I'm going to tell you something, as a person who's observed Raider Nation for 5 years, who goes out to the parking lots where they tailgate, who travels and visits black holes and speaks to Raider fans every single day. The fact that you reference where he's from, and let me just quote it. Quote, because he's from Compton, he thinks he knows the Raider way. That's not true. Because none of where you're from determines Raider Nation. You can find the boisterous and the quiet, the reserved and the extemporaneous. You can find folks of all backgrounds, all philosophies, all socioeconomic worlds who call themselves members of Raider Nation. You can find behemoth men and tiny women. When you reference where somebody's from and knowing the Raider way, you clearly have proven you have no clue what the Raider way is. I don't care if you got a paycheck signed by Al Davis. I don't claim to be a member of Raider Nation, but boy, they've got my respect. And one thing I have learned about them, it don't matter where they're from. He knows the Raider way because he grew up a Raider fan. He cut his teeth on what the Raiders were under Al Davis. He sat in those stadiums and watched the black hole. I have been around Antonio Pierce, I would venture to say, probably more than you, Mike. Maybe not. He doesn't have to pretend to be a Raider. And he never tries to tell you that I have the definitive definition of what a Raider is. You know why? Because he is one. You calling out him would be about as absurd as me calling out a 5'10", 120-pound wide receiver for being fat. Or you don't know what it's like to be skinny. No, I have no idea what it's like to be skinny. Literally be like me walking up to one of the Raiderettes. Let me tell you, you do not know the struggle of being a skinny, pretty woman in this world. Give me a break. That's how absurd and stupid that comment sounds. Wait. It's almost like I'm selling Ginzu knives. There's more. It's a joke. You're calling a man who becomes one of 32 in the NFL a joke. You're calling a man who just got the head coaching job at one of the most prestigious professional sports teams in the world, in the way he has conducted himself, a joke? A joke. A joke. What's the joke about it? What's the joke? Is the joke that he's employed by the Raiders and you're not? What's the joke? You know what? I'm not a Raider fan. But in covering them for 5 years and actually trying to get to know and to understand them, my opinion is if you want to look in the dictionary what it means to be a Raider fan, you're going to see probably two names: Ice Cube and Antonio Pierce. Neither one of those men are jokes. But I'm going to tell you other names that are going to appear in there. See, they're names from all over the world. People that have never stepped a foot in Oakland or Las Vegas or Los Angeles. It's people from all over the world. All different colors. See, you don't have to look like AP or Ice Cube or Violator to be a Raider. To be a Raider, you got to have certain things that you stand for, certain things that you believe. One thing I've learned from Raider Nation is that they are all committed, just win. These are the same people that when their team sucks, they still show up. They're there. They care. There's no apathy. When the organization has not given them reasons to be excited, you should see the email I get. More excited right now than I've ever been. I have one of us. See, my opinion of what a Raider is doesn't matter. It is futile. I would never suggest, oh, Hondo is the definitive source on what a Raider is. But you know what? I get tons of emails from Raiders. Never been so excited before. Now we have one of us. Now we're excited. Now we get it. See, only one team wins the Super Bowl every year. The other 31 are constantly trying to climb that mountain. But when Raider Nation says we've got one of ours, I've never walked out of the off of the football field at Allegiant Stadium or walked out of the stadium and had people shout, "Oh no, oh no, 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 no." AP did. When the black hole is screaming your name, you don't think the black hole knows what a Raider is? I have immense respect for the black hole. Immense respect for Raider Nation. My wife and young son are now part of it. I found out about these comments from my wife. She was livid. I said, "What are you so mad about? You've been a Raider fan for a few months." Oh, I'm mad. She became a Raider fan because of AP. She not count because she's a pretty young, not 52 years old. I think she's young. But is she not a Raider because she's from the cornfields of Ovid, Michigan? Or is she not a Raider because she's blonde? Maybe she's not a Raider because she's a woman. Maybe she's not a Raider because she never worked for the organization. Maybe she's not a Raider because I don't know. All I know is this incredible group known as Raider Nation that goes past geographical boundaries, that crosses oceans, that has nothing to do with socioeconomics, has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with race or gender. It's a mindset, it's a lifestyle. She bought into it. There's an old adage called enlarge your circle of love. One thing I have learned about Raider Nation, they always have room for more. They are the kindest, warmest people I've ever met. You walk through those pregame tailgates. You see, before I moved to Las Vegas to cover the Raiders, I'd been to Raider games. You know my relationship with Matt Millen, who I love and adore. Matt said to me once, the only difference between the Raiders and the other NFL teams is the other NFL teams as fans think they're part of the team, but the Raiders players and organization believes the fans are part of the team. It's different. It's different. And I'm sorry. I think it is sad to call it a joke and comical. I root for good people. I want Dan Campbell of the Lions to do really well. What a great person he is. Now, I grew up in Michigan. I covered the Lions. And although I am not now, for many years, I was a devout Lion fan. He gets to Detroit. Am I now going to say that he doesn't know the Lion way? No, he's the head coach. He's defining it because it's constantly evolving. D'Amico Ryan. D'Amico Ryans did such a good job at Houston. What a and by the way, fantastic, like Dan, fantastic human being. Great person. I want good people to succeed. I root for good coaches. I like to see people who are good people, who work hard, who have a hard work ethic, who aren't complainers, aren't gossips, aren't murmurers, aren't complainers. Just keep your head down and go to work. I think that's cool. See, when you start telling what is the Raider way and what isn't, you speak from a place of arrogance. And I can tell you one thing I've learned about Raider Nation, and I'm not part of it. There ain't nothing arrogant about them, about themselves. They take pride in their franchise, but it's not pride in themselves. And you spend some time with Gorilla Rilla, Violator. They love this organization. They dressed up just to make the black hole something, not because they were trying to get all the media attention, and they get a lot now and deserve it. They deserve it. But it isn't about them. I've met Raider fans who have to sacrifice to get to one game. One game. Parents will save money all year to be able to take their kids to one game a year. Why? Because it's not about them. It's about their franchise. Matt Millen said it best. These fans are part of the organization. You see, that little lady who cleans hotel rooms, who wears her Raiders shirt on Sunday, living in the inner city. That guy over, and I interviewed him a couple of days ago, a couple of guys who are from Glasgow, who are part of UK Parliament. They're not Americans, but they're Raiders. You can find a big old farmer in the rural areas throwing hay in the summer, slopping pigs in the fall, herding ground in the spring. He's a Raider. You can find people in the inner cities. You can find them in the country. You can find them anywhere you want. It don't matter if they've ever been to a game. Because being a Raider in the Raider way has nothing to do with that. Mike Lombardi is a tremendous father, and he's had a long career in the NFL, to which he should be applauded. He should be applauded. He's done far more in the NFL than I've ever done. Those comments came from a cheap shot and a man that did not earn it. Mike Lombardi, you're better than that. You're better than that. And I want to end this part with this. One thing that I have learned about Raider fans is they are the most inclusive and warm people I've ever met. Ever met. I'm very proud that my wife and my youngest son are part of Raider Nation, because Raider Nation's good people. And one thing I've learned being around Raider Nation, whether it's going to black hole chapters and speaking, whether it's all the emails I get, or whether it's being in the lots for tailgates, or being in the stadium, or being at practice, one thing I've learned about Raider fan is they're just warm. They're warm. They're the backbone of America, and they're the backbone of their countries. Because the way I describe Raider Nation is a Midwest colloquialism that we like to use where I'm from in Michigan. You'll say about somebody, them good people. Raider Nation is good people. Antonio Pierce is good people. That's the Raider way. Do they always make the best draft picks? No. Do they always get the best free agents? No. Do they always get it right? No. But one thing you can count on about the Raider way, they ain't never given up, and they'll be back tomorrow. Here's the whole deal. Antonio Pierce isn't going to defend himself, nor should he. And I thought those were cheap shots. And I had so many people asking me for my comments. I had radio stations. I'm like, no, I'm just going to address it on my podcast. If Antonio Pierce is not the Raider way, it's so comical because he's from Compton. He thinks he knows the Raider way. If Antonio Pierce doesn't know the Raider way, ain't nobody does. He said it. I was hired to be fired. Why? Because he knows this organization is only about winning. And if he doesn't win, he's out. He gets it. He's a Raider. He understands I'm only going to be judged by one thing: winning. 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 I'm going to end with this. I have no issues being critical of anyone that I cover. I've been critical of Mark Davis, and I've been very supportive of Mark Davis. I've been critical and supportive of a lot of people. But this was personal. This was calling someone comical, a joke. That's personal. I'm sorry. If I know somebody's good people and I hear people make it personal, I'm going to voice my opinion. I have that platform. And that's how I feel. So let's get going. I want to talk about the draft coming up because there's a couple of things that I find really, really fascinating. I believe the record for offensive linemen picked in the first round is 5 or 6. I think we're going to see as many as 10. I know that seems hard to believe, nearly double. But I just talking to executives and asking them about what they feel, what they're what they feel, what they're surmising, what they're gathering. As many as 10. I think that's pretty incredible. That tells you the absolute depth. In fact, we may see quarterback, wide receiver, and offensive lineman be the first 10 picks. I don't think that's going to happen. I think somebody will pick a corner before, but still, that should tell you the depth of this draft. A lot of depth here. This is going to be a great draft. There's going to be a lot of good players picked. There's going to be a lot of bad picks because some folks, you know how that works. They consistently are in the top half of the draft every year because they don't know how to draft. They fall in love with a guy. Boy, he goes and has a great combine. Okay, but what's the film say? Let's go back. Terrion Arnold, who I told you many people believe will be the first round pick in my first mock draft. Excuse me. I had him mocked to the Raiders at 1. Okay. We had heard that at Bama at a workout, he had last week, 4.3. He does a 4.5 at the combine. I think he'll get that to 4.4 at his pro day. But that's not going to turn off people who understand when you put the tape in, you see how Terrion Arnold plays. You see it. You can't run from it. It's viable. And there's always going to be those teams who fall in love with people or are so desperate at a position. You hear people say, do you take a position of need? So let's say you're picking at 13 and you have a need. Okay, but what if the person who's best at your place of need isn't worthy of the 13th pick? What do you do? Well, do you go ahead and just pick them and overpay them? Bad drafting teams do. Now, some people go up and take guys because they think they're undervalued by others. And they say, yeah, they are worth 13, even though everyone else has them as a second rounder or a third rounder. This is why evaluation is so vitally and important. And this is why I again, I think there's going to be as many as 10 offensive linemen in the first round. It's going to be phenomenal to watch. I'm more excited about this draft than any draft ever. There's just so much depth. And then with the people who make bad picks, it's going to keep pushing that depth down. Remember last year, there was a few guys, not a lot, but there were a few guys that were first round quality still available in the second round. Michael Mayer was one of them. I was told, today's Monday, so I was told, I don't remember now if it's Saturday or Sunday, but one of the days, I was told you could see some first round depth well into the second round. The Raiders, at their second pick in the second round, are still going to probably get a first round talent. Probably. It's a deep draft. There's a lot of great talent here. A lot of great talent. I had something else that really stood out to me. As you guys know, I am totally understanding of Luke Getsy being the offensive coordinator. Now, a lot of people who only look at, his time in Chicago maybe aren't that way. But I'm a big supporter of Luke Getsy. I love what he did throughout his career and into Green Bay. And I had multiple people, in fact, multiple, that I didn't even bring Getsy up. They brought Getsy up to me. I thought that was pretty cool. And the respect that he has around the league. So Raider Nation, I know some of you are very nervous about what happened in Chicago. I'm not blaming you about that. But I'm telling you, around the league, the hire of Getsy was, matter of fact, I had one coach tell me, not a Raider coach, but a coach tell me, he said, I gained a lot of respect for AP picking Getsy because most guys in his position wouldn't have done that. And I know how respected I feel about him and how others respect him. To me, that showed me how smart Antonio was. He wasn't the sexy pick, but he was a good pick. I thought that was, and I thought you guys would appreciate that, the respect for Getsy. I'm going to also give you a name I want you to keep an eye on, Charles Turner, offensive lineman out of LSU. Just keep your eye on him. Raiders are intrigued by him. Not saying it's definitive he's going to be a Raider. Just telling you the Raiders are interested in him. I am hearing that Chicago is going to start coming down on their cost on Justin Fields. I can tell you as of this moment right now, the Raiders have not made the definitive decision of what they're going to do in the draft. And while I told you I thought it was unlikely because of the cost with Justin previously, and I think it's still unlikely as of this moment, the fact that Chicago's coming down, I think, puts it more on the front windshield than looking at it out the rear windshield. So just keep an eye on that. A lot of great stuff going on. A lot of stuff coming up. Cannot wait to share it all with you. From all of us at the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Raiders Today coverage. Thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow me on IG at Hondo SR, and you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, when you go to at Hondo Carpenter. Please go to si.com/NFL/Raiders to get all your coverage. Appreciate you, respect you, honor you, wish you nothing but the best. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.